Even among friends, good manners are crucial. My mother often emphasized this, especially when it came to money, insisting that everything be done properly. Whether or not it applied to past situations, I never imagined how relevant her advice would become. My name is S. I'm a 30-year-old part-time worker living with my 4-year-old daughter and my husband Bob, who works in an office. We rent an apartment 2 train stops away from my in-laws, who live conveniently close to Bob's workplace. As a result, Bob often has dinner at their place. While it might seem considerate, the reality is that Bob is thoughtless and self-centered. He casually stops by his parents' house after work without informing me, even though I'm at home preparing dinner. I've spoken to him about it many times, but he always makes excuses like, "Mom's making meatloaf and mashed potatoes tonight," and never apologizes. Fortunately, my father-in-law usually calls to ask, "Did Bob let you know he's coming over here?" This heads up at least saves our dinner from going to waste. While my father-in-law is considerate, my mother-in-law is quite the opposite. She often makes snide remarks like, "Bob just prefers my cooking over his wife's." Whenever Bob visits them, she'd call to gloat, "He just feels more at ease at home. Sally, you need to make a home where your husband wants to stay." She looks down on me, asserting her superiority as a woman and a mother. She also has a habit of barging into our apartment whenever she finds the time. Bob can't relax with this kind of cleaning. "And what's this in the fridge?" She'd criticize my cleaning, snoop through our fridge, and even throughout my cooking, saying, "How dare you serve Bob such an awful meal? Any wife who doesn't take care of food is the worst. Everything you cook just goes to waste." When I pointed out that I could have eaten it instead of throwing it away, she'd retort, "You're the one wasting food." She'd turn red with rage and start yelling. My daughter would get scared and start crying, prompting my mother-in-law to hurriedly leave, not wanting to be disliked by her. She's selfish and quick to run away when things get tough. I confided in Bob about his mother's bullying, but he brushed it off with remarks like, "You're just imagining things," or "She doesn't mean any harm." The bright and sociable nature that initially attracted me to him now feels like a distant memory. These days, he's moody and dismissive, even ignoring our daughter when she tries to talk to him. His standing as a father has hit rock bottom. To make matters worse, the education fund we had been diligently saving for our daughter had completely disappeared. A significant sum, $40,000, had been withdrawn. I knew it had to be Bob, as he had access to the family account. When I confronted him about the missing money, he nonchalantly said, "Our daughter doesn't need the money right now. We can save up again when it's necessary." His cavalier attitude snapped something in me. "Are you serious? How could you just spend the money we saved together like that? It's not about needing it right now. We saved it because we don't know when we'll need it. What did you even spend it on?" "I helped out Mom," he replied. "Our money. Most of it comes from what I earned. Got a problem with that?" "I contributed too. I saved by cutting our budget and worked hard to manage that money." "Your contributions are insignificant." Our argument escalated, fortunately without waking our daughter. "That's it, we're getting a divorce. I knew you were careless, but to withdraw our child's savings without a word is unbelievable. Go ahead, like you can survive on a part-time salary." I was momentarily speechless. Seemingly satisfied with silencing me, he sneered, "I'm always ready for a divorce," and went back to his room. Though I clenched my fists in frustration, I refused to just cry myself to sleep. Determined, I began preparing for the divorce. I overheard my wife talking on the phone with Bob this morning. My father-in-law messaged me the following Friday. It seemed my mother-in-law had invited my husband for a special dinner that night. Since Bob hadn't mentioned anything to me, he was likely planning to go without telling me again. Ever since I declared my intention to divorce and was belittled for my part-time job, Bob's attitude toward me had shifted to one of disdain. He'd say things like, "I don't need to care for a dependent like you," while scattering the laundry around and neglecting to clean the room. His nitpicking, "You call this cleaning?" was just like his mother's. I saw the call from my father-in-law as the perfect opportunity to put my plan into action. I timed my visit to coincide with Bob's return from work, only to find that my father-in-law hadn't yet arrived home. Bob and my mother-in-law were visibly surprised to see me, but my mother-in-law sneered, "Oh, knowing we're having sushi for dinner, you decided to drop by and freeload? How despicable. You don't deserve sushi," Bob added, his tone harsh. It was clear they had no intention of letting me inside. Though the detached house had a wooden front door that wasn't very soundproof, Their loud shouting was audible outside. As usual, they were a selfish pair, completely oblivious to those around them. I haven't received any message about coming for sushi. The only thing I was told by your father was that you were visiting your parents' house. Are you being sarcastic because I didn't inform you? Do I need to report every move to a housemaid? It's creepy for a wife to talk to my dad behind my back, he said, seeming almost entranced by his own abusive words while my mother-in-law smirked in the background. I retorted, the one being creepy is you, causing her smile to falter. What did you say? It's disgusting to twist your father's kindness like that. You're just a lousy husband who can't communicate. Can't you see he's only trying to be considerate? My words seemed to strike a nerve. Realizing his lack of communication, Bob bit his lip and fell silent. Then you should have declined and avoided causing trouble for Dad with your brazen behavior, my mother-in-law defended him, but her words were hollow and meaningless. Keep arguing over there. I didn't come here to waste time with you. Let's get to the point. I want a divorce. What? Really? Bob's eyes widened in genuine shock. You think you can manage on a part-time salary? I'm not giving up our granddaughter. You're not fit to raise her. Go apologize to Mom. I calmly explained the situation to the shouting pair. Starting next month, I'll be working full-time again. I'm currently working part-time in medical administration at the same place where I worked full-time before we got married. When I mentioned considering a divorce to my colleagues, they recommended I return to full-time work. The kindergarten my daughter attends is near my workplace, so I can pick her up during my lunch break, and she can stay at the daycare till my shift ends. They even advised me on this. You can't possibly raise her on your own, my mother-in-law insisted. Anticipating you'd say that, I've already arranged to live with my parents. They're taking care of my daughter today. Unlike a certain husband who dismisses his daughter, they shower her with love and attention. What? My mother-in-law turned to Bob, who awkwardly looked away. Don't joke around, that's unacceptable. Her voice trembled with agitation. A father who secretly uses the education fund is harmful, I said firmly. At that moment, the front door opened, and my father-in-law appeared, saying, Sorry for interrupting. Can I hear more about this? It seemed he had been listening at the entrance. You use the education fund? What do you mean, Bob? Dad, it's not what it seems. Mom asked me for help with renovation costs, so I supported her, Bob said. Renovation costs? My father-in-law looked confused and turned to my mother-in-law for clarification. Bob suggested we move in together. It's more cost-effective than continuing to pay rent, and if we're going to live together, renovations are necessary, she explained. That's where the money went. I was overwhelmed by the new information. Moving in together, I haven't heard anything about that. And what about the education fund? Sally, can you clarify? I then explained to my father-in-law about the money Bob had withdrawn and that we were getting a divorce. Then you should just leave. Leave the granddaughter here. I'll take care of her, my mother-in-law insisted, her voice trembling. No, this is a decision made by my husband. I can't go back on a promise made between spouses. Ha! I don't remember agreeing to anything like that, I thought to myself. I pulled out a file from my bag and showed it to them. This is the pledge we made regarding the education fund, especially considering Bob's carelessness. I had documented our agreement just in case. My mother always said to document everything related to money, I explained. Bob's signature is here, my father-in-law observed, sounding impressed. What? Why is this here? Bob asked in a panic, likely having signed without fully understanding the terms. The agreement was straightforward. If the education funds were used for anything other than their intended purpose, it would lead to an immediate divorce. In such a case, custody of any children involved would go to the other parent. If Bob couldn't comply, he would be required to pay twice the amount used, giving me grounds to pursue divorce mediation. Essentially, Bob would lose custody and, if unable to meet his obligations, would owe me $80,000, allowing me to seek mediation for the divorce. If you follow your mother's advice, this will turn into a dispute involving an $80,000 payment. I've gathered ample evidence of both your usual behavior and your mother's treatment of me, so you can imagine who will get custody in mediation. I smiled slightly, and my husband gasped. Huh? My father-in-law looked surprised, let out a heavy sigh, and said to my mother-in-law, For now, return the money Bob gave you. You haven't started the renovations yet, so the money should still be there. Upon hearing this, my husband's face brightened, possibly thinking that returning the education fund might make the divorce impossible. My mother-in-law, facing his hopeful expression, turned pale and shook her head. "It's gone. I've already spent it," came a weak voice, eliciting gasps of surprise from everyone. "What?" My mother-in-law trembled and fell silent. "There was a bag I wanted and some clothes too. I only meant to borrow them, but I couldn't resist," she confessed. I was at a loss for words, but my father-in-law quickly responded, "This is ridiculous. What were you thinking?" But Bob said we could save up again for the granddaughter's education fund, so I thought it would be okay," she defended herself. "What? You knew it was meant for our daughter's education and has still spent it. How can you say you won't hand over our granddaughter? Who's truly despicable here? You and Bob are the worst kind of parent and child," I said, my anger boiling over, my voice colder than I intended. My mother-in-law stared at me, stunned. "I'm sorry, but I no longer want to be part of this family." "I agree. They're nothing but toxic to our precious granddaughter." At these words, my mother-in-law broke down in tears. After that, I divorced Bob. Thanks to the evidence of mistreatment and the pledge, the child support and property division went as I had hoped. The education fund, which included a third from my salary, along with alimony, totaled $50,000, which I received. My ex-husband struggled to come up with the money, and my mother-in-law had to sell all her designer goods and jewelry to contribute. The remaining amount was covered by my father-in-law. Bob and his mother tried to blame my father-in-law, saying, "Helping your wife is a husband's job," but he became enraged and severed ties with both of them. My ex-husband approached my mother-in-law about moving in together after he had botched a project at work, leading to a demotion and a reduced salary. They could no longer afford their apartment rent and had to downsize to a smaller place. To raise the necessary funds, they were forced to cancel their life insurance policies. By pooling the money from each policy, they managed to cover the repayment amount. It seemed he was looking for sympathy when he reported the completed payment and recounted his struggles. When he spoke of his difficulties while informing me about the payment, I simply responded with a non-committal "aha" and let it go. Frustrated, he shouted over the phone, "Don't you have a word of gratitude?" "No, I don't. I have grievances of my own, so how about adding that to the bill and charging you for it?" I suggested, and he fell silent. I then hung up and changed my contact information. That was the last I heard from him. However, my mother-in-law later asked my father-in-law for a reconciliation, but he clearly refused. From what he gathered, their situation was dire. Their spending habits had not improved, and their finances were in disarray. Now, the once close parent-child duo were mired in constant arguments, blaming each other for their troubles. "Ha, your beloved son, isn't he?" my father-in-law said sarcastically. My mother-in-law retorted, "He's nothing but an irritating money pit." Whether dealing with parents, children, or spouses, it's crucial to be clear about financial matters. Reflecting on my mother's teachings, I felt a deep sense of affirmation in her wisdom.